Good Friday morning, which is redundant. So it is a good day. It's a Friday, and it's also, 5 minutes before 8 o'clock in the morning here in Western Iowa. Hope you're having a great weekend so far. I mean, it's almost the weekend. We'll take it. Here's what's going on weather-wise. That's what we do here at the Weather Mic. You didn't tune in for, I don't know, movie reviews. So here we go. These are your hazards, as the National Weather Service calls them, the extreme weather really across the country. And Southwest is it's on fire. Excessive heat warnings continue again through the weekend, really, for southern Arizona, western Arizona, into Las Vegas area, and into Southern California. So really hot here. And then the rest of the watches warnings pretty much are associated with Helene, which is still a tropical storm, which we'll get into here in just a second. But we're still looking at a lot of watches and warnings here. So we have tornado watches, tornado warnings, tropical storm warnings still, because it's still a tropical storm, flood watches, flood warnings, and also high wind warnings and wind advisories all over this map. So still a lot going on with Helene, who made landfall last night with 140 mile an hour sustained winds. Let's go to my Twitter feed. So I pulled up some Helene stuff, and first of all, this is a rescue scene in Atlanta. So not even Florida, this is Atlanta. I mean, with the heavy rains, and there was lots of flash flooding, and unfortunately this lady drove into flood waters. It's harder to recognize flooding dangers at night, and so she had to be rescued, and I think her and her dog. So that had a happy ending, but not good for that car, of course, and pretty scary. As we scroll down through the feed, here's just a picture of Helene. There's a weather guy talking Helene. Now, this is kind of funny. This has gone viral. You may have seen this. But a guy who lives in Tampa with the storm surge, you can see how deep that storm surge is. That's good 4 feet in his living room. And so he did a live stream to TikTok from his kayak or canoe floating around in his living room. And I watched part of this, and the floodwaters were still rising at this point. So not good for his house, but obviously he's safe, so that is good. And then I was watching live last night, and Perry, Florida seemed to be where a lot of the storm chasers were. So this is what that looked like as it was making landfall. And just one more here in the scroll. It's a tale of two hurricanes. So this is a lapse of Helene right here. Do I have to click into this for you to see my pointer? So that's Helene right there. And this is John. So John's been on the Pacific side this whole time. And lots of wind here, and, lots of heavy rain for parts of Mexico. All right. Let's get more into Helene and see what's going on, because still tropical storm. And we can see the tropical storm wind field there in the orange. Currently, this is the 8 a.m. Eastern time intermediate advisory, the latest advisory. But still, almost 2 hours old. But it was moving to the north at 30 miles an hour with sustained winds of still 60 miles an hour. The border of Georgia, South Carolina there. So still quite windy, and that's sustained winds, gusting higher, of course. And then we see the forecast as our tropical storm still hangs in there as a tropical storm as it makes it into Tennessee and then becomes a tropical depression and starts to, wind down as far as wind and rain goes, but still windy and still rainy. And here's the wind history with Helene. And so the deep red is the hurricane force winds, and then the orange is the tropical storm force winds. And you see that wind affecting pretty much all of Florida, most of Georgia, all of South Carolina into North Carolina. So, lots of effects from, a major hurricane like this, of course. You're going to just have that. All right, here's your flash flooding risk still moving forward. And we're still looking at Atlanta northward into the mountains, especially of South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and also back towards Nashville and Memphis. That area, I mean, that's at least a 40% chance of flash flooding, even 70% there in the mountains of North Carolina. And the 15% chance of flash flooding is widespread in the yellow, and the green, at least 5% around that. So still a lot of rain coming from Helene, which could cause some problems. How much rain, you ask? Glad you asked. We have a handy map for that. So we're looking at, quite a bit of rain still as the low, and we'll show you what it's going to be doing tracking wise, but I have to look around my camera here. So the green is 2 to 4, the yellow is 4 to 6 inches of rain still coming on top of what has already fallen from Helene. All right, surface for today for the rest of the country too. A system moving into the Pacific Northwest, cooler and rainy for Washington, Oregon. How odd for them. Colorado, New Mexico, some showers there. And then, of course, still Tropical Storm Helene in Georgia, moving to the north and causing all the flooding problems and the severe weather problems for North Carolina. South Carolina is still a thing. And so here's a look at that. This is our chance for severe weather, and we've got an enhanced area, North Carolina, South Carolina, and the slight chance all the way up into Virginia. And here's what the tornado risk looks like with that. When you have a landfalling hurricane and it's still strong enough to be spawning tornadoes, mainly on the right-hand side of the tornado, in this case, the eastern side of the tornado, hurricane. My dyslexia kicks in, or I don't even know what you would call that. I guess that's dyslexia. Anyway, a 10% chance of tornadoes is pretty high from North Carolina into South Carolina, and the 5% in the brown gets you into southern Virginia as well. And even the 2%, we can still see tornadoes in the 2% area. So that's Maryland, West Virginia, even part of that, and even a little bit of Tennessee. All right, let's get into our temperatures, and I've added a new map because I think this might make it easier to see, especially if you're watching on a smaller device. This is our temperature anomalies currently. So this is our actually highs today, I believe. So these are the highs for today, departure from average. And where we see the rain-cooled Helene air, we're looking 10, 15 degrees below average. Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Missouri, and even the light blue is slightly below average here in the southeast, up into the Midwest and parts of the east, but very much above average for the northern plains on this map. And and I did want to mention this too. So even down Phoenix and Tucson, we're only 10, 11, 12 degrees above average, but that translates to 111 degrees for Phoenix. So it should be around 100, but it's 111 today. All right, 109 for Tucson, very hot. 90s, upper 80s to low 90s for Texas, and then up into the plains, a lot of upper 80s to near 90. We're going to be in the low to mid 80s for Iowa, where I live. And then it gets cooler as you head into the Midwest, and even cooler with the rain-cooled air of Helene. And the Northwest cooling off a little bit with that system moving in. Lows tomorrow morning, very nice for much of the country. A lot of 50s, 40s, and 50s for the West and the Rockies and the Northern Plains. But you get into the plains, we're talking mostly 50s, and that translates to 60s. Into the Midwest, there's again lows for tomorrow. Desert Southwest starting out in the low 80s. So, there you go. You got to ramp up to your excessive heat warning. And it's quite warm along the East Coast, to 70s to start the day, but up in the Northeast, very pleasant. Surface for tomorrow, post-tropical cyclone Helene, centered near Kentucky, Tennessee, with still some heavy rain, flash flooding possible. Kentucky into Indiana, maybe a little bit of Ohio, with an occluded front from pretty vigorous low, even though remember we have two lows that are converging. We'll show you that again. And then, lots of rain all the way into Michigan, even to the northeast, down into the southeast, and then more showery along the coast. Here's your anomalies for tomorrow. So staying below average high temperatures for Tennessee, Kentucky is the bullseye. 15, almost 20 degrees below average for this time of year. Conversely, the northern plains is much above average, 20 plus degrees above average temperature wise. And so that's the case for probably the western 2/3 of the country, above average temperatures. And that translates to these kinds of highs. So Des Moines, 15 degrees above average means a high of 85. Should be around 70 this time of year. So it is warm in the plains, 80s and low 90s. And then even in the west, Look at Idaho, low to mid 90s along the Snake River Basin Valley thing. 93 Baker, Oregon. Those are summer-like temperatures, and of course the desert Southwest very hot, and then cool around the remnants of Helene and the rain, and that goes up into the Great Lakes and the Northeast. Another way to look at the 48-hour rain, this is what's expected in the next 2 days, and the bullseye would be western Tennessee, western Kentucky, with that 4-5 inches of rain possible. That drops off to more like 3 from Ohio, the rest of Kentucky almost, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, getting into Missouri and Arkansas. And then you see along the spine of the Appalachian Mountains there in western North Carolina, then 4, 5, 6 inches of rain possible in that narrow strip. That's what the mountains do, wring out more moisture. Surface for Sunday as we round out the weekend. Our tropical system is now just a regular low. Showers around that for the Midwest into the Northeast, into parts of the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic down through Florida. And some rain up there, Canadian border, Montana, Idaho, Washington. All right, let's take a look real quick. Do we ever do this real quick? Maybe. This European model right here. And let me make sure it's on the current. There's the current. And we can see our low is still a tropical storm in northern Georgia, pretty close to South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee, where all those states meet. And so you can see all the wind around that, and the rain mainly on the northern side of the tropical storm, a little bit on the western side, but still very heavy rainfall coming down here and very windy. Now we have our low here and we have our low here, and they're going to do a little dance and merge into one, and they do that by, this is tonight. And you can see how much it's raining itself out. Still pretty windy, but not, obviously not as windy, but breezy and rainy with our low as we go into Saturday and as we go into Sunday. Kind of the only game in town. You see a little bit of snow up here in British Columbia and Alberta, Canada, but staying on the Canadian side, and then some showers as we go through Sunday. So quieting down, is that the right word? Quite a bit as we go through the weekend. 6 to 10 day temperature trend as we get into October. This is October 2nd through 6th. Much above average for the Southwest and the Four Corners, but really most of the country with a good chance of above average temperatures, kind of near average, equal chances from, say, Ohio River Valley, Tennessee River Valley to the Mid-Atlantic and parts of the Northeast. And then precipitation-wise, pretty dry. Much of the country, so this is below average precipitation. Doesn't mean it won't rain, but a good chance that the precipitation, if it does happen, will be below average. And then above average confined down there to the Gulf Coast of the Southeast, including Florida, and then way up there in the Northwest, the Olympic Mountains and Seattle, Bellingham area. All right, so there's a look at Helene, which is finally starting to relax a little bit. They'll be cleaning up like crazy in Florida and Georgia especially, but the other places a mess, and still watching out for tornadoes for the Carolinas, especially for today. So if you're in those areas, you know what to do. Make sure you have ways to get warnings in case you need them. So there's your forecast through the weekend. Thanks again for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And we will do it again tomorrow right here on the Weather Mic.